Hi everyone, my name is Mira. I was 16 when my family and I came to America illegally. Don't ask, it was a long and dangerous journey. From the Middle East to Mexico, and then to America. We could have gone to jail dozens of times, but it would have still been better than what we had at home. But that's not the point now. We arrived in America and I realized that my father had absolutely no plan for what to do next. My parents were barely able to find low-paying illegal work, and I was babysitting my 5-year-old sister. It was clear that soon we could end up on the street and starve to death. Most of all, I felt sorry for my sister. I watched her sleep and tears came to my eyes. We needed help urgently, and this is where all of our problems started. The fact is that there was a very rich man in the local community of people from our country. As my father said, this man helped his countrymen, but he always asked for something in return. At that time, my parents and I were willing to do anything so that we could provide better living conditions for my sister. So Dad went to negotiate with him, and when he came back, he told us the terrible news. This person could easily provide housing and work for my family, but in return, he wanted me. He didn't want me for himself, of course. He had a son my age. He wanted me to marry him. It was just a shock to me. Getting married at 16? This was nonsense, and I flatly rejected this idea. But my father tried to convince me that this was the only way out. We fought a lot. I shouted that we could take care of ourselves, but then my parents used a mean trick. They asked me to do it for my sister. It was the only way to give her a normal future. My parents would get jobs and papers, and when the dust settled, I could leave my husband and come back to my family. Of course, this doesn't suit me, and we continued to argue. But soon I had to change my mind. How could I refuse my own sister? We had no choice, so my father and I went to make a deal with the devil. I agreed to get married, and just a few hours later, we went to our new apartment. However, I wasn't going to live there. I packed my things and said goodbye to my parents and my beloved sister. Then a car came to pick me up and I went to this rich man's mansion. The plan was for me to stay with them for a few months while the wedding was being prepared. And then I had to become Malik's wife and start living a full family life. It seemed easy, right? But if you were in my shoes, even for a second, you would understand that this big house was just a living hell. Absolutely every detail of my life began to bring me suffering. First of all, my fiancé, Malik, was 16 years old and had grown up rich. So he was a spoiled and cranky child. I had the feeling that I was just a toy for him, which he demanded from his father. He was constantly yelling and was always unhappy with something. His family was tough, and I was completely unrelatable for them. This was an absolutely patriarchal family, where women had no rights to even leave the house without their husband's permission. And don't even get me started with the head of the family. Ugh, after a couple of weeks, he was a real devil to me. I wasn't used to this kind of arrangement in a house where I was just a piece of scenery that couldn't move without permission. So we had a lot of confrontations. I didn't want to follow his stupid rules, so he kept yelling at me and threatening to break our deal and leave my family on the streets. There were also a lot of servants in the house. There were people who were just like my family, refugees who were in trouble. But they worked in this house and I lived in luxury, or so they thought. So they were jealous of me and considered me an enemy. Everyone in this house was against me. My fiancé, his parents, the house employees. I had the feeling that each of them wanted to stick a knife in my back. The only person I could really communicate with was Ismail. He was 17 and worked in the kitchen with his family. He was probably the only one who felt sorry for my situation. He understood that I was going to marry a crazy rich idiot and that I was just trapped. Then the preparations for the wedding began. It was terribly painful. Of course, no one asked me if I wanted to participate in the crazy traditions of their family, so I just had to obey. Most of all, I had problems with my wedding dress. The fact is that I had to wear the dress Malik's mother got married in, and we had completely different body types. She was as thin as a needle and I was... let's say I needed to lose a few pounds. So when I tried on the dress for the first time, it was decided that I should go on a diet. But I didn't expect the definition of diet in this family was just flat out hunger. At dinner, I just watched everyone eat wings and fries, but I could only have a couple of vegetables and a glass of water. I would never have lasted a month living this life if I hadn't had any help. Ismail. He had access to the kitchen, and sometimes he would secretly bring a sandwich or a cutlet to my room. While I was eating, we chatted a little, and it was nice to talk to someone normal. However, when his parents found out about it, he was severely punished. Yes, I was once again convinced that no one in this house was going to support me. But then I had my life threatened. It was Malik. We were not supposed to have any type of relationship before the wedding, but he wanted to break the rule, and he started constantly hitting on me. It all started with just talking, and then he tried to flirt with me. But when I refused to reciprocate, he started to get angry. One day we were alone in the same room and he started harassing me again. His eyes were just crazy and I didn't know what he was going to do. So when he grabbed my arm, I just started screaming in fear. But no one came to help. I continued to scream and suddenly the door to the room burst open. Ismail! He pulled Malik off of me, but suddenly the head of the family came running and saw a rather strange picture. He thought that Ismail had started a fight. So within half an hour, my friend and his family were packing up their things because they had been fired. I only had time to talk to him for a minute after that. Ismail protected me because he was in love with me, and he couldn't bear to watch me suffer. He said he could help me escape if I wanted to. Our conversation was abruptly interrupted, and all I had time to tell him was that I didn't want to lose him. I spent the rest of the time before the wedding alone. I was very worried about Ismail and I wanted to see him again. He was so brave. He went against his parents and the owner of the house to help me. I thought about him most of the time. I may have liked him too. I don't know. Anyway, there was nothing I could do. Then it was time for the wedding. I was afraid of it and I hoped that this day would never come. But now I was sitting at the table, looking at over 100 guests who were unknown to me. Everyone said toasts, wished us a happy future, and after each toast, Malik kissed me. Ugh, just disgusting. Worst of all, my parents were happy about my marriage. It just broke my heart. Later that evening, when the guests were almost gone, I had to spend my first night with my husband. My hands were shaking with fear, and all I wanted to do was crouch in a corner and cry. I wanted to change clothes in the bathroom and I was just trying to stall in there. I knew that when I got out, ugly Malik would be waiting for me. And this time, no one would help me. Suddenly, I heard a knock on the window, and then another. I opened the window and saw Ismail. He said to get out quickly and he put a ladder under the window. I was still in my wedding dress, but there was no time to waste. When I was on the ground, we heard a shout in our direction. It was Malik's father who was seeing the guests off. He was running towards us and we ran towards the fence. Ismail helped me to climb up and then threw me a backpack, but Malik's father was very close. Ismail shouted at me to run and then he ran in the other direction. I ran as fast as I could and soon found a quiet place to catch my breath. There were things in the backpack for me to change into and an envelope. Ismail bought bus tickets and left a note about a meeting place if something went wrong. I quickly changed my clothes and went to the bus station. I waited for Ismail for hours. I was very worried because there were only 15 minutes left before the bus departed. 10 minutes. 5. And then I heard his voice. He made it! I was so happy at that moment and I jumped into his arms. He saved me and I was very grateful to him. Ismail was my hero. Then we stuck to his plan. We got as far away from this damn city as possible and found a Red Cross facility. We said we were Middle Eastern refugees, which was true. But we lied about being brother and sister, and we also gave false names. We did this so that we could not be separated and so no one could find us after our escape. Now, I am 20 years old and I am happy that I met Ismail. We lived under false names until we turned 18. And now, we are going to get married. Only now, for real. And now that the dust has settled, I want to visit my little sister. I hope that she's okay, and that my parents haven't prepared her for the same fate as me.